Welcome back to another episode of The Adversity Advantage. I'm your host, Doug Bopst, and today's guest is digital creator and TikTok star Ellie Zeiler, who has over 10 million followers on TikTok. And we also have her mom, Sarah Zeiler, on the podcast. And today is going to be a deep dive behind the scenes. And it's not going to be about creating content, so to speak, but we're going to get deep. We're going to get real. We're going to talk about mental health. We're going to talk about how it impacts family dynamics. We're going to talk about how it impacts parenting. We're going to talk about how to deal with bullying. We're going to talk about addiction. We're going to talk about boundaries. We're going to talk about what it's like getting famous as a teenager. We're going to talk about so much that is real, raw, and relatable. And I think you all are going to get a lot out of this episode. So without further ado, let's get this conversation going and welcome Ellie and Sarah Zeiler to the Adversity Advantage podcast. Ellie, Sarah, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks for having us.
I'm super excited to chat with you both because I don't think I've ever done this where I've had a mother-daughter on to talk about like what it's like not only to be in the creative space, which I know you both are, but also like the dynamic, the family dynamic that goes into this when somebody in the family like you, Ellie, pops off and develops some fame, some notoriety, and it changes the trajectory of the family. So I'm excited to dive into all of that. But I guess my first question is, there's a lot of people that listen to my show that maybe they don't fully understand like how TikTok works. Maybe they don't fully understand like what goes into being a creator. So like, what do you think is the biggest misconception out there on the internet about the digital creative space?
I probably think that, and it's interesting because the misconception maybe was truth and like started as a fact. And now I think that it's transitioned, but I think probably the misconception that we just like dance all day or make dumb videos all day. I think that it's really transitioned into something that can be, again, a full-time job, obviously, and takes a lot of work.
I can definitely see that because I have friends that are in the creative space. And sometimes I'll be texting with them and they're on planes to this state, they're on planes to that state. They have meetings with these people. They got meetings doing brand deals. They're spending hours a day creating content. So I've learned that you're right. It's not just about gathering at a party and filming like TikTok videos, like doing some dance. It's more about how can I make this a business? How can I make myself financially secure? How can I make sure I'm making the right decisions that align with who I am personally? Sarah, I got to ask you, like, how is your opinion of TikTok and the creator space maybe changed since Ellie has gotten some fame and since you've gotten into it yourself?
It's complete a 180. Before when TikTok was just becoming sort of popular among teenagers, I was very much pretty closed off to it. I just looked at it as another kind of voyeuristic app like YouTube and anything, Instagram. And I just said, all three of my kids were talking about it. And I was like, please don't add another app to your schedule because you're already consuming so much. And, at the time we were in the thick of just regular school days and sports life and typical teenage life. And I tried putting screen time on my kids' phones. So they had like a limit to all the apps that they used. TikTok wasn't even on my radar. I was like, nope, you're not adding another one. Things changed dramatically when we went into quarantine and we had all the time in the world. And that's really when things lit up for Ellie. She didn't actively use the app. And when she started to, it was maybe a week and a half, 2 weeks into quarantine. And it pretty much lit on fire right away. We all got into it. We all leaned right in and we were having a great time with it. I think that we're really lucky because I had the time as a family. We had a time to understand it, to get on board, to participate and support. And actually at that time, we decided that we would show up for her. Ellie experienced some negativity, a lot of that negativity and hate at the beginning. And we decided to show up as a family, create accounts of our own, join in on some of her content whenever the time was right, so people could understand that she came from kind of a united force in front and she came from a very loving background.
I think that's really important to be involved as involved as you were and are as parents in this space, because I think what probably tends to happen in many cases is some of these kids want to get into the creator space, whether it's TikTok, YouTube, and the parents are unfamiliar with it because they didn't grow up with it. So they just kind of just push to the side and say, okay, whatever, like go ahead and try it. And deep down, they probably think like the kid is not going to succeed anyway. So they just don't even put any effort into trying to support them. But I think when you have somebody that like went all in like Ellie did, and then you guys as parents are like, all right, like she's all in and I want what's best for her. And I think she's going to do great. And I want to see this through. So it's time for us to have, our feet in the door as well with this thing so that she can set herself up for more success.
No, sorry. I think that really quickly, that it was also just that I grew up always wanting, and my parents always wanting me to have a passion in things. And so like, I tried every sport you can imagine. I tried all instruments. I tried like everything that you possibly could, and just nothing stuck with me. And I think that they were very excited for me to see or find a passion, something that I really, really enjoyed doing. And that like every single day in quarantine, I would wake up and do this for hours and hours. And I truly, truly loved it. And so I'm sure that definitely had something to do with like, oh, she's got her thing. Like now we're going to support her, which I'm so lucky that I had parents that are like that.
Right. Because it's not like you started this when you're in your 20s. I mean, you recently, I guess, turned 18 not too long ago. You started as a teenager. You're in high school, like doing this. So what was that transition like? Were you like before quarantine, were you like in person at a high school, and then all of a sudden, just by combination of quarantine and everything that you've accomplished since, you transitioned out of a in-person school?
Precisely. It's like really scary to think about that I haven't been to an in-person school since my career started and since quarantine started. But I don't know if I could have continued it going to in-person school, because students and kids are so mean. I'm just so unbelievably lucky that we got to be in quarantine and that I got to get off of school and then start this career, because I've seen kids just get torn apart. Like, I mean, and even I was one of those kids that like a lot of people didn't like, but it was like without this. So I think adding this on, I don't think it would have continued if I was going to in-person school. That's why
I think if you met and you lined up, 20, 30 kids that do TikTok, for example, and they've turned it into a full-time job or career path, you'll kind of hear, and what I've noticed in listening to interviews and meeting people is you'll kind of hear that the majority of them were maybe on the outside a little bit in their own environment, whether or not they kind of looked and acted the part, just like Ellie. She played competitive sports. She didn't have, she looks like everybody else and dressed like everybody else. She dressed a little bit better, and that got her some heat sometimes. But overall, I think you'll see that everybody kind of looked like a regular teenager, but they probably had something in them that made them feel a little bit like an outlier. And I think they have their own personal experiences that involve bullying or feeling like an outcast or not totally feeling connected. And when you're that kid in school and then you become you gain notoriety on social media, it can be torture going to school. And we've heard enough stories that that's the case. And so I think that, like, back to kind of your question, we were like, if you're going to do this, and once we realized that there was opportunity in it for, not just brand deals and making money, but networking and being able to sit in calls and strategize with brands and meet people and go to really cool events, not during quarantine, but now we were like, if you're going to do this, you're going to treat this like it's your job, and you're going to treat it like it's a business, and you're going to hold yourself accountable to it and be a professional and always be respectful and treat, when you're on a call or we're doing a call like this, or you're having a meeting or you're supposed to show up somewhere, you need to be on time and you need to show up and work, because this is other people's time and their career too. And Ellie got that. And I think it's because she did play sports and because she was a hardworking student, that helps too. She was just sort of like raised with a work ethic, and that is a big factor.
Right. And I think another really big factor is having this foundation that it seems she has at home with both of her parents and siblings. I know I've heard her talk that I think your brothers are your best friends. So I think that's like something that it's not rare, but it's maybe not as common as people think, that they have this foundation at home where they're being fully supportive in the creator space. Because I know several creators that have had some deep pain in their childhood, and they turn that into some form of meaningful work or purpose through creation. But, some didn't have the foundation like at home, like Ellie has, which I think is an added layer of support and accountability for success. And especially when it comes to bullying and facing negativity. And I want to get into that. So Ellie, like, I got to imagine, I mean, for anybody, it's really tough to face hate online and face negativity and bullying, but I got to imagine it's even tougher for a teenager. So what have been some of your like best practices in handling online hate so that it doesn't cause some sort of downward spiral that keeps you down?
I think that it's interesting because since I did go through people not liking me and people disagreeing with me in high school, when I got onto social media and was receiving hate, like I was used to people not liking everything that I did. And I was used to some people liking it, some people not liking it. And so that definitely helped me and contributed. On the other hand, I feel like we all go through it where some days we feel like everything's great and we're on top of the world and no hate comment can let us down. And then other days it's like that one comment can really affect us and you want to get in bed and just never look at your phone again. And so it really, I think that a tactic that always helped me in the beginning and still helps me to this day is having things outside of just your job and outside of TikTok. It's very easy to get consumed with it all day, every day, and just trying to like really be on your phone all day, which is, we all know is not healthy. It's such a cliche, but it really isn't. And so to do things that like made me feel good, and for the advice factor to make other people feel good, in the sense that like have your routine, work out every day, see your outside friends, just do things outside of your job. Because listen to something the other day that's like, everybody wants to be self-employed until your 9 to 5 turns into a 24/7. And that is really this job. Like if I didn't want to take a break ever, that would be totally possible. And that is when like a hate comment could really get to you, is when it's totally consuming your life.
And I know like a lot of what you've gone through and what you've overcome has inspired you to kind of take a stand against bullying. So like, what do you think needs to change? Like, what is it that you're trying to accomplish with regards to like the anti-bully, with regards to your passion for the anti-bullying movement?
I think that it's not necessarily the like anti-hate aspect of it, but it's like the pro-kindness aspect of it, where I don't know, it was just never something that I understood. I just never thought, I just never understood hate. And so I think probably carrying that mindset through life, and again, encouraging people to do exactly what they want, dress how they want, be exactly who they want to be, because I really feel like I have done it, and I have been in that high school mentality and space where it's like, if you're not wearing this brand, people don't like you. And like, I've gotten through that. And so I don't know, it's kind of just thinking that all situations are temporary. You can get out of it.
I think like back to the way that she was raised. When I look back, and even today when I was thinking about talking to you, I was thinking about the things that we, as my husband Rick and I, have always talked to our kids about from a really young age. And there were things like that might sound really harsh, but I remember when my kids were pretty young saying, they were worried about what other people thought. Somebody was concerned about something that a kid was going to think or do at school. And I was like, you know how you think about yourself all the time? So does everybody else. Nobody really cares. Nobody really cares what you do. They may say they care. They may say something mean, but at the end of the day, they're not thinking about you. So you just need to go do what you want to do, and you don't have to answer to anybody. And I think the other thing is I had this mantra that every morning when the kids got out of the car to go to school, I would say, work hard, be kind, and don't take any crap. And that can be confusing, but it also just says like other people's opinions and other people's behavior has nothing to do with you. And I think in trying to just ingrain that in their heads while they're growing up and understanding that it may sound really, it sounds kind of brutal, like nobody really cares about you except us. We love you. You care. You need to care about you. You need to believe in you. We believe in you. So does your family and your close friends. But ultimately, other people just aren't that relevant when you go into the world, especially people who are giving you a hard time. And so when the hate comments and the bullying stuff happened at school or the negative stuff comes in, it can rock you. I mean, she's a human being. We're all human. It bothers me. People say things to me, and people have criticized our parenting and all kinds of stuff. But, at the end of the day, I know that anybody who says something hateful or mean in a comment or to your face is coming from a place of pain, and they're coming from a place of envy or just overall insecurity, or they're struggling with something else. And so if you have it in you to turn the tables and be like, are you okay? But if not, you just have to try and Rick is like water off a duck's back. Let it roll. Who cares? Don't let anybody get in your way of doing what you want to do.
And I think we spend so much time as human beings just focusing on what other people think of us.
Oh, yeah.
Instead of what we think of us. I think in the creator space specifically, I think there's room for that, because essentially like your ability to make money is based off what your audience thinks of you, right? If your audience doesn't trust you, they're not going to buy any product and the brand deals won't get renewed. If your audience doesn't like you, they'll unfollow you, and then the amount of money you can make for a post goes down. So I think there is some gray area in that, but I think you have to have the foundation first of sticking true to your values, maintaining integrity, knowing who you are as a person. And then like the other stuff I think will work itself out. So I guess like Sarah, like for you, like what's been like something that's been like an unforeseen like blessing that's come out of all this for you as a parent? Because I can imagine there was a lot of fear when this all kind of started on what was going to happen, what was all going to transpire, how was this going to impact Ellie's mental health and everything else?
Yeah, I think that the real blessing in all of this is that Ellie, I believe, has been able to grow and become who she was more meant to be as far as a creative person. I think that when you live in suburban America or anywhere, there's a lot of pressure on kids to be like not only everybody else, but to be very standard. There's like an outline for what you're supposed to do, and you're supposed to be a good athlete, and you're supposed to be a straight A student and beyond, right? You're supposed to be like this real cookie cutter type of kid, at least in the areas, especially where we live. But I think, in it, like I said, suburban America, and there's not a whole lot of room for creativity and for taking risks, because there's just so many hours in the day and these kids are just jam-packed with their lives. And so Ellie has always been a creative person. She studied, she went to film camps and took editing classes, and she was really into behind the camera. She, loved filming and making videos and the editing side in particular, and photography. And we really didn't give her the time for it. And we always laughed, like, we'd go out on a Saturday night and she'd be home, and we'd come home and she's like, look at this short film I made, or look at this music video I made. And we were like, wow, that's amazing. But it didn't turn the light bulb on that she had this passion in her, because we were like, oh, got to get up early for your basketball game tomorrow. And it just didn't seem, there wasn't a connection. And so seeing her get to, and I guess not only dive into something that she really likes, but of course be able to validate that it's something successful is pretty awesome to see. And I don't think there's anything wrong with the way, we did it. Like, sports are great and athletes are, hard, get a lot out of that. Good grades are never a bad thing, but I'm just really happy for her that she's been able to use this as a way of kind of fulfilling her creative side. The one thing is that when you get into this world of being a content creator and you see some success with it, I think it's really hard to see beyond it and what you're going to do next. And there's a lot of fear around that's built into the influencer world of like becoming irrelevant or things just not, staying hot forever. I think that's the next thing to sort of work through, is to always think of options and like be ready for anything. You can always do something else.
Yeah, because people's attention spans are becoming shorter and shorter by the day. And what's interesting is that it's almost like she's a more like a full-time like actress, right? Because you think about it, like a lot of people in the film and entertainment industry, they may get a shot when they're younger and they're forced to leave school and go away and move to LA or New York or whatever it is and pursue acting. And I've used this analogy before. You think about like an actor, I would say like a good solid actor. I mean, if I'm guessing, maybe they're seen on film with new movies, maybe like 2-3 times a year, maybe at most. With a creator, it's daily, sometimes twice a day, 3 times a day, 4 times a day. So the risk of being judged, the risk of being bullied, the risk of being hated on is that much more.
That's a good point.
So Ellie, I kind of asked your mom about like an unexpected blessing from her end that came from this, and she just mentioned how proud she is essentially of you, that you found your passion and something to pursue. Like for you as a creator, like what's been something like amazing that's happened for you that you weren't expecting?
I would have to respond the exact same way as it really is this passion of mine that my whole life I was looking for, and I finally found it. And it's really like, that's my answer. I found my passion, and that's why I was so excited.
It's pretty mind-boggling to think of somebody who really liked editing videos and had a very creative side and liked storytelling and thought of being, it's interesting because Ellie wanted to be a movie trailer editor. That was like something that she had in mind because she liked to like shorter form videos and like really get it. And I think that's probably a product of just like her age and her age group, that they're used to consuming shorter form content, right? Like they're not watching long movies very often, as much as maybe you were. And so getting to see her turn this into something that we've always called a stepping stone, and it's just a great experience, and turning it into a career is really exciting. And she's always had other things in mind, and everything rolls it into the next thing. So it's really cool to see her gain all this experience.
Right. And I want to go back to something that you said, Sarah, about like continuing to be creative in this space, because you're right. Like you can quickly become irrelevant, and these trends are, by the time I see some of these like dance trends or trends on TikTok with a certain song, by the time I get around to trying it, it's already passed. And I'm like a dinosaur when it comes to this stuff.
Well, exactly. And so that's where I think the opportunity comes along for you to really start to lace in all of the things that are truly authentic to whatever it is you're going through at that very particular time. Sometimes, like you said, you're posting 2-3 times a day. If you're just trying to keep up with dance trends and you're not like looking to be a professional dancer, or you're looking to, you're following a certain trend that's kind of flash in the pan, that's going to be really tough to keep up with, because you're never going to show your personality through that. And so I think what's really neat is very early on, and I think part of this was because Ellie felt like she was getting a lot of negative backlash and people weren't really seeing her personality, because she too was doing the trends. It's like incredible that something went off in her own newly 16-year-old brain and said, I need to show these people who I am. And she started doing that using her own voice.
It was more of the mindset of like, I'm going to show you who I am and you're going to like it because
you're going to like me.
I know.
Yeah, she was. And she that was her mission. Like, sure, she'd do the trends because they always perform well, but then she'd throw in, personal vlogs. She'd do some cooking stuff. She'd do some outfit stuff and talk through it, and really getting people to get comfortable with her voice and also her personality, and getting to know her background. And that's where you can create some longevity and sustainability with this kind of job, whether it be Ellie or the thousands of other people who do it. If you've got the courage to be vulnerable and show who you are as often as you feel like doing it, you're going to get people who feel connected to you, and they are going through similar things, and they're going to be on your journey with you, going through the different stages of life. So if you're starting as a teenager, and then you're going to college, and then you're going to your first job, and then you're going to get married, whatever the life plan is, those people are going to be along for the ride with it. And that's where I think the content creator / influencer world has gone very quickly because of TikTok.
Right. And you see the people who get the best engagement, and it tends to be the people that just say whatever's on their mind, and they are themselves, right? Like you think
It's
about
so scary.
And that's what I think is it's kind of like a good and bad thing, right? It can be bad because of course, like not everything should be shared on the internet.
True.
Right? But I think the positive thing that's come out of it is it's shown that people love authenticity. People like vulnerability. People connect to that, because if somebody is going through a hard time in their life and they happen to just be scrolling through TikTok, and maybe it's a teenage girl who's being bullied in high school, and they see a video from Ellie talking about being bullied and how she's gotten through it, like that teenage girl is probably going to feel a lot better that day because she's seeing somebody on the internet that she can relate to. And that's what I think is the beautiful thing about social media, is it gives people a great opportunity to connect in a way that's super authentic. So Ellie, I want to get into the content creation piece, not necessarily like how to, create a video, but I imagine there's a lot of people that they think that, people who use TikTok, they're at a party with their friends and they just start dancing and they just put it up on the internet right away. But I imagine there's a lot more planning that goes into that. So like, say like you put out like 4 or 5 TikTok videos, like how much time goes into that? What does that look like? Are you spending hours a day? Are you doing it once a day? Like what kind of planning goes into that?
It really does depend. Where, as we said, like when we were in quarantine and had so much time, it was like, busting out 5 videos a day. Whereas now it's definitely slowed down because of there's so much on everybody's plate. But I do think that it does depend on what my mom was saying, where it's like the mixing in the dance videos, where they're like fun trends that you get to do and just like, take an hour to do, versus the ones where you really want to show someone something and show them a part of you. And that's where I think that the genuine planning comes into play. So it really does depend.
Got it.
I can tell you it takes a long time. It is not easy to make even like an outfit transition video. It can take a couple hours. You have to film it, edit it, obviously plan it. It can take more than a couple hours, a few hours. It takes a lot of planning. And when you see people start to really click with their content, it takes people to help them too, right? A lot of people are starting to have another person film them. The editing part of it takes a long time, the timing of it, using all the different tools in the TikTok app in particular. But they're also, people that do this are on all the other apps too. So they're making content not just for TikTok, they're making content for Instagram, which is a completely different type of content. And then they're repurposing it for Reels on Instagram. And then they've got to go on Snapchat. If you're in Ellie's, world, you're going on Snapchat and having to give them some other piece of you that's more authentic and off the cuff. And so and then if you want to be a YouTuber, which, is equally time consuming, when your phone isn't on, your camera's rolling, and you're trying to be interesting for a longer form YouTube video, it's extremely demanding.
Just going to say, and even like with the trends, you still you have to be on it. You have to it's not just one-sided, which my dad has always, he doesn't really understand, where he's just like, just put it out there and don't look at it. Why are you scrolling on the app? And I'm like, to know the trends, you have to watch them first and really be immersed in the whole culture of it.
Right. Yeah, that makes sense. And I also think that I'm sure a big part of content creation is comes down to maybe the people you spend time with, different circles, like collaborations. So Ellie, as a teenager in the space, has there been anybody like a mentor, anybody who's helped you along the way that has had a positive influence on you?
In what way? Because I feel like you were talking about being in a crowd with like influencers. So like an influencer that has, or just
Yeah, has there been like somebody in the influencer creator space that has had like a really big positive impact on you and essentially maybe served as a mentor for you?
I think that it's interesting and something that I commend myself for, which is very hard for me to do, but something that I try to do, is that I've really built this without being with a lot of people, where I think it was, and this is just another path of it, but it's not like I judge them. It just maybe wasn't my path, or it wasn't like I did join a content house and have those creators around me all the time. I moved to LA less than a month ago or 2 months ago. And so I haven't really been around creators, which I'm excited to do. And I'm excited to start that new path. But I think in the creator space, not too much. Of course, it like is a day to day where I follow people that I love and that I genuinely do really like watching. And so of course they inspire me. And so it's like, I'm a fan, even though I'm a creator, I'm also a fan of a lot of people, which I think is fun as well.
Yeah, that makes sense. And I have heard you say that you kind of been somebody who's kind of gone along the path yourself. I just didn't know if there was maybe somebody you just happened to meet along the way that you looked up to, or somebody that you respected and you wanted to learn more specifically like through them. I wanted to ask you about like addiction, and not like necessarily drug addiction specifically, but obviously social media, fame, stuff like that can be very addicting, right? We see it happen all the time. So have you had any instances in this journey the last few years where you felt yourself just addicted to the hustle of being a creator, addicted to social media, addicted of getting more likes, and just had to press pause or take a step back or anything like that?
To this day, my therapist is like, Ellie, leave your phone at home when you go to the gym. You don't need your phone. But like, I really do have an addiction to it. How I think I would describe it, and maybe on the creator side, is that with being a creator, the highs are so high and the lows can be so low. And so you just get addicted to seeing these. It's so crazy how like my scale has gone out of whack. Whereas before it's like, if I were to get 1,000 likes on an Instagram post, I would be like so happy, but then I'd be like, I'm moving on for the day. Whereas now I'm like, more, I need more. It really, that is like a very much drug type of term, I would say, is like always wanting more. I still am working on balancing it. It's hard because it's not like something that people can say, like, just quit, like, just stop, just quit, because it's my career. And so I think working on healthier boundaries is very important for me to do, but I still struggle with it every single day.
No, I was just going to say it's hard because it's almost like, because social media, I can imagine, affects the brain in similar ways that other drugs might. So it would almost be like somebody having a career and doing drugs. Like, where's the off switch? You know,
and that's the thing is like, even my mom will be like, screen time messes with your sleep cycle. And I'm like, okay, yeah, but like, I still like TikTok, and I'm like looking for ideas for tomorrow, like just like stuff like that. And so, I definitely make the excuses for it. And I'm sure that it does mess with my physical state.
Sarah, what were you going to say?
I was going to say that I mean, for sure it's an addiction. And I think that I have it to a certain degree.
I have it too. It's okay. Don't
worry. Thank you. I'm glad. I'm not glad, but I feel closer to you now. I think it's this tricky thing when you do it as a job, and it's something that you're like, that you do as your career path or whatever. And you can really mess with yourself in kind of justifying it because of all the things that Ellie just said. And I'm really interested in just the trauma that it caused, that social media overall has caused, and that is really like how it's affected younger people in particular. I mean, certainly affects older people too, but I think like there's so many things that have been lost because of social media, and that's interpersonal skills and attention span. But what it does to your self-worth is like the really the most scary thing. I think that the comparison part of it, but also this validation thing that you're looking for that has like nothing to do with an actual real thing or accomplishment. And, or, you know, maybe it does if you're posting about a really big accomplishment, but it's all kind of like, it's messy. And the more you can talk about it and be aware of it, I don't even know if the awareness helps all that much, but it's a starting point. And just forcing yourself to get away from it's really hard though, especially for a teenager. Like a teenage brain is already not developed fully. And then it's got this thing that's just filling all of its opportunity to work out and become its own strong kind of presence. It's like relying on things that have nothing to do with their own development, which is scary.
Ellie, were you going to add something?
I was just going to say that, well, a couple of things. I have really bad ADHD brain. So at first I was just going to say that it's a lot of sensory overload. And then I've never thought about it in a drug term or sense, but it is something that, like, I don't know if people with drugs necessarily go through this, but I can imagine that they do, where it's like, I've been doing this for a couple of years that I'm like so far down the hole in it that there's no quitting now. There's no like cutting some down because it's just my life. And like, this is what I'm used to, where I really do believe that my maybe like chemical balance or something in my brain has definitely changed because of my attention span is so unbelievably short. It's embarrassing to say out loud, as well as just, again, it's sensory overload at all times.
Yeah, and as somebody who is a former drug addict, you're spot on. It's just the way it is. Like, I think you mentioned, like, you used to be so happy with 1,000 likes, and now it's like more and more and more. And that's how it is with drug addiction. You used to be okay with a certain level of high or doing a certain dose, and then you need more and more. It's like a dog trying to chase its own tail. Like, it just never happens, right? You're always looking for that initial rush that was so good, but so fleeting at the same time. And that, I can imagine, it seems that's what happens with social media and with drug addiction. You're so far down the path that you've developed like new neural pathways in your brain, and you've become a different version of yourself. And also it's become your identity. Like, one of the hardest things for me in leaving my addiction was like the rituals that came along with it. It was like a certain religion. Like, all that mattered was who I was getting high with, what drugs I was doing, what I was going to eat afterwards, who I was spending time with. It was like, that was the more addicting part in many ways.
Yeah.
And I think you're fortunate to have a good community and that with your family around you, because I know for me, one of the most addicting parts of it was it gave me like a sense of connection that I never had, right? Because I could feel at peace with myself for the first time. I had friends around me that I was getting high with. It served as my family. And it's sad, like, how quickly it took over my life. Now, it wasn't something that was a legal profession for me, if you will. Like, I was selling drugs illegally and doing drugs illegally. So I can see how difficult and challenging it can be, both as a parent, Sarah, and for you, Ellie. So what kind of boundaries, maybe as a family, have you had to set in place, if any, when it comes to like social media use, when it comes to screen time? Like, has there been anything that's been put in place?
No, I think that we kind of abandoned that a long time ago because
I feel like we're all getting older and like the rules
didn't
apply, where it's more of like a self-help type of thing, where it's to the point where when we were younger, my mom and dad, when we were on our way to dinner or something, they'd be like, hand us our phones from the front of the car. And like, we'd all hand it, and we're like, oh, fine, here's our phones. Whereas now I like purposely don't bring my phone because I'm aware of it.
Yeah. And I think that is exactly right, which is first of all, my husband and I both grew up with parents who had addictions. And they, I know that my dad in particular raised me with a lot of like, he had his own addiction problems, but he was super judgy and like really strict on things with me because I think he was afraid of what tendencies I might have. And he was pretty closed-minded to normal teenage things. And I remember being pregnant with Ellie and like writing a note that said like something about like it basically to support that notion, you need to meet your kids where they are instead of come at the parenting from this like dictator position, which obviously we do when needed and it's appropriate, but trying to set rules and like trying to make rules that are definitely going to be broken sets up a whole lot of problems, right? Dishonesty, lying, sneaking, the shame that comes with it. And then overall, just this like hiding thing. And so, talking about everything, I'm like extremely analytical. I'm really into psychology. I'm very much into this opportunity to be a good parent, but not be perfect, but to like really share it with the kids. But talking about it constantly and like sharing my, kitchen counter analysis, so to speak, is a big part of it, and teaching the kids to truly analyze it themselves and like understand their behavior instead of just shunning it and being like, get off your phone.
For example, last night, usually my mom is like, get off your phone before you go to bed, or don't watch TV, no screen time before bed. And I'm like, whatever, I'll go under the covers and do it. Whereas last night I was like, I have an early meeting tomorrow, Ellie, like, of course I live alone now. And so it was all like this self-analyzing where I was like, I have an early meeting tomorrow, like better put your phone in the other room. And so I did. So
obviously, like from a parent, you can't help it, right? You're like like a parrot. You're like, you can't stop like chirping at your kids. You say the same things and try and embed it. And that's always been like, that's my greatest wish as a parent, is you just hope that all of your hard work and everything that you've tried to drill into them actually affects them and helps them when they leave your house. Like, you're going to see the worst of your kids and they're going to probably, not do what you say in front of you. But generally speaking, I found that when they go out into the world, they take all those tools with them.
Right. And I guess as a follow-up to the boundaries question, Sarah, this is for you. It seems that you and Rick have instilled really good, solid values in Ellie and in the way you raised her as a person. Like, what kind of advice, if any, have you given her maybe in the last couple of years, now that she has accomplished some fame at a very young age? Because you see a lot of people that get famous very young and they go off the deep end with addiction. They have severe mental health issues. They lose themselves. Like, have you given her any kind of advice on that?
As far as which part, like addiction and
like how to live in the moment, like handle the fame in a way that's healthy?
Yeah, I think just being really real and being honest, which sounds kind of cliche, but I think staying humble and trusting yourself. And, when she moved to LA, I would say my biggest piece of advice was, don't assume that anybody else has it more figured out than you do. Because yes, you're 18, but you've come this far and you've built something pretty remarkable. And before social media, you accomplished a whole lot of really cool stuff too. And you know yourself better than anybody. So don't be impressionable. Take good advice and take it for what it's worth, but ultimately check in with yourself.
So funny how the qualities and like the things that you would say when I was younger just carry through now, just maybe in different terms, where again, it's like, be kind, but don't take any crap, or like the saying, like, only focus on yourself because no one else matters, like things like that, where they just apply even more when you get older and like on a higher scale.
I think the other part, which is ironic, this is really ironic since her job is to like get people to like her, essentially, like it's connected to people liking her. But I wasn't the mom that was concerned with how many friends she had or if everybody liked her. Same with my boys. If they had an issue with a kid, I wasn't like, well, let's figure out how you can get along with them. I was like, let's figure out how you can find people to get along with and not focus on a crappy relationship and not take any crap from a mean girl and not try to like alter yourself to make people really like you or just at baseline be nice to you so you can survive the day. And that comes with some loneliness at times. And it's certainly not a traditional way to raise kids. Most moms are super concerned with their daughters and sons' social status and their friend group and how popular they are or how many people they have to connect with. And I was like, it sounds really kind of insensitive and maybe it wasn't the right thing. And it could have been a mistake, but I just think those school years are temporary. And I had a really difficult time growing up and all the crappy stuff that I went through it made me stronger, but none of it mattered when I became an adult. And I think parents focus far too much on like the exterior stuff of their kids' childhood instead of who they're teaching, what they're teaching to help their kid become an adult.
Right. Yeah, because you see a lot of parents are just so focused on the accolades and like what colleges they get into, like what sports they play, like what medals or championships they win or whatever. And I think it can be very destructive to kids' mental health. And Ellie, so you kind of mentioned, you mentioned how you're still struggling with getting this balance in check when it comes to like social media and screen time use. And you mentioned that you're in therapy. I know you're passionate about your mental health. So what are some of the other things that you do on a regular basis to kind of protect your mental health and improve your outlook on life?
As I said before, I like to stick to my routine and I like to do things outside of my job that make me feel good. For example, it's cliche, but working out or cooking for yourself or being self-sufficient or doing things that I think might be lost. Whereas I would say in the way that like social media made me grow up very, very quickly. And I think right now I'm getting to the point where things that I might have skipped past in quarantine or maybe just skipped past in general, I'm now like going back and trying to do these things. For example, like going to the movies with friends or going swimming or like simple things that a lot of adults maybe might not do. But I think for me, I think it's very crucial that I keep getting to do those things so that I can protect myself. I think it's also, I'm a big fan, and I've gotten to be this way of protecting my energy, where before I would hang out with people and I might let them kind of beat me down or tear me down a little. And my mom has given me a lot of confidence in myself to be like, if you don't like someone, you don't have to hang out with them. And so it's very much like if I'm with someone and I don't like who I am around them, I'm like in a place in life where I've just decided I don't need to be friends with them.
Yeah, that's some really good advice from your mom on that, because I think as humans, we're meant to be loyal in some way. And sometimes we're so caught up in like the amount of time we've spent with somebody or maybe something that they've done for us that we feel we have to hang out with them forever, despite the fact that they're treating us like complete garbage.
Well, and also, like, don't you remember I don't know if you've ever went through this, but for a big part of my life, I assumed that if a relationship wasn't working, it was my fault. And there was something wrong with me that made that person not like me or that I like didn't like them. And it was my issue. I think that comes from being like growing up in the kind of the dysfunctional codependent family that I had, where I took on a lot of my parents' stuff and assumed that like I had something to do with it. And I think that I like really wanted to teach that to my kids, because it took me getting honestly into my late 30s and 40s before I was like, oh, I don't actually have to be around people I don't want to be around. And I pay attention now to somebody who like, when I leave, I feel like gross after I'm with them or just exhausted and not really like hyped up and connected. I feel drained and like I would have rather been alone. than done that. And so I think the sooner you can learn that, the more relief you're going to experience day to day and just like choosing what you do with your time.
Right. Absolutely. And like something that I'll say often is you feel like way more alone, like spending time with people that don't bring the best out in you than you ever will, like consciously making that choice
Yes.
to spend time alone, to work on yourself and to grow. So Sarah, I know there's obviously been, I'm sure, many challenges as a parent with Ellie's journey and everything, but what would you say has been the hardest part of all this for you?
I think the hardest part is knowing when to let her do what she wants, meaning not do what she wants. She always kind of like whatever you see is what she wants. But I think that I come from, and my husband and I have this like insane focus on work ethic. And so we were in the early times, we had this like, okay, you've decided to do this. Now you've got to be all on board. And there were times, and I don't know if other parents have gone through this in the same situation or with anything, but like we were almost treating it like it was a like school/sport commitment where we were like, you got to practice, you got to work at it, you got to put more, you didn't post and you haven't posted in 5 days. You've got to like, when you put that kind of thing. And I mean, I regret it to a certain degree because of the nature of what we're talking about, which is like, you have to make a TikTok. But on the other hand, I think that particular thing is what caused the tension between us early on, where we would like kind of butt our nose in and be like, are you going to post something? Or why don't you post that? That's something that's really big. People constantly being like, you should make a TikTok about that. You should do that. Or why did you take that TikTok down? And she'd be like, because I just decided I didn't like it. And I was like, oh, but somebody else might like it. And don't worry about what people think. Like all the like input was I think my greatest mistake. My input on the posting and like creative side. That is a very personal thing. And it's a really hard thing to do. And part of why I started posting myself and I don't do it consistently because it's hard. It's hard. You don't always feel like it. You don't always want to show your best self, and you don't always want to share something just because you like it. And you don't always want to stage a video and film something. And so really learning that and respecting her own process and decisions has been a big part of this.
Yeah, I can imagine it's got to be tough, right? To know where to draw the line and when to step in, when to step out, because I'm sure the dynamic of the family has changed in some way, because you would think that traditionally, while most kids turn 18, they're really not independent, right? They're either in college or maybe they're still living at home or they're doing something else, but their parents typically in many cases are still heavily involved in their lives, where Ellie, kind of in a way became self-sufficient fairly young because now she's making her own money. She's got her own brand deals and that sort of thing. So I'm sure like there's been this power dynamic shift a little bit, which has made it hard because you're trying to coach her as a parent. And then I can imagine on Ellie's perspective being like, I got this, like I'm paying my bills, like everything's good.
No, she doesn't have that. I would imagine that would be the case. She's a really good person. She doesn't have ego about it. She doesn't consider money power. She doesn't think that she doesn't consider this a guarantee for anything. She's pretty conservative with what she's made, and she's very conservative. She's much more interested in like her long-term safety, like security. And so she doesn't approach it like that. And I would say she's almost more dependent on us throughout this than she was even before. She's like, we're the only people she feels she can really trust and be her complete self with. And so I guess that we're lucky we created that, and that she feels that way and that she trusts us, and we're always looking out for her best interest. I think that every family dynamic is different and every background of a family is different. We waited a long time. Like a lot of people in her position would have moved to LA 2 years ago. And we were like, you need to get through applying to colleges. Wherever you may end up going or when you go is another story. but you need to see it through because you've worked hard to get through all these years of school. So we just had like little benchmarks for her, so she could always have her head held high, like, I've done this stuff. And I don't look back and like, she doesn't look back and go, I didn't do a whole bunch of normal, like things that I would have done otherwise. But we're lucky that she's like not only dependent, I would say in like the best form of the word, but she's really appreciative of the support that we give her, thankfully.
I don't think it doesn't come across to me that she's egotistical in any way about it. I guess my question was more like, I know from my parents, they were like, well, until you support yourself financially, like we have all the say in the house. And then like once I started making some money, then I realized I had some more freedom and I felt more independent. I could make some different decisions than what my parents wanted me to do.
Yeah.
Because I was supporting myself financially. And I think that's pretty common.
Me too. I was the same exact way. I was like, well, if you're not happy with what time I come home, I guess I'll just move out because I can afford it now. No, she hasn't been like that.
It's because like everything we say and said in the beginning isn't BS. I really do appreciate my family. My mom and dad and my brothers, Ben and Will, are my best friends. And there's nothing that I would ever do to jeopardize that. And also I depend on them a lot, like a lot, where I know that, I don't know. For some reason, I don't think like that.
That's a really good trait to have because I think what can happen, and I've seen it happen to people when they get a little notoriety, they get a little fame, they get some followers, they change who they are at their core and they let that become their total identity. Now, granted, I'm sure in some ways it impacts anybody in a way where they feel a little bit more important or a little bit more egotistical in some ways. Like when that happens, at least I can tell when I've grown or gotten something that's good that's happened to me, I've definitely felt better about myself. But there's people that their identity gets so wrapped up in social media that they forget where they came from. And it's so cool to see that you just haven't. And I think it's a really good thing you have going on.
You know, what's interesting about that is that I would say across the board, more people would say that the other people in their lives changed when things like this happened to them, no matter what form of fame it is. It's the people around you that kind of change the way that they relate to you. Ellie said, you know, not to speak for you, Ellie, but you've often said, like, I find the people in my life, like maybe friends and outside, like distant relatives, stopped asking me questions about how I am or what's going on in my life because they think they know by what they see. And, you know, so much of what you see has nothing to do with what's going on, you know, emotionally sometimes. And I think that's been the hardest part is the disconnection from people in a really empathetic, connected way that you used to be able to kind of commiserate with or just like be bonded to emotionally. People just look at what they see and assume everything's amazing in your life.
It's social media, I guess, right? People assume that everything on social media is just the way things are. And
Absolutely.
And I also think we're all still humans, right? And that was my point. Like, no matter how many followers you have, no matter how much money you have, no matter how much success you have, you're still a human being, and you still want to be checked on. You still want to have deep, meaningful relationships, because at the end of the day, like, that is what's going to drive like authentic fulfillment and happiness as you go on about your life. And Ellie, you mentioned like the college thing. So I guess I wanted to ask, like, what's next for you? Do you see yourself like going to college? Is being a creator like what you want to be like full time, or do you see yourself going to college to pursue something else on the side?
I want to do as much as I possibly can. And so I don't know all of the colleges that I've gotten into or gotten rejected from yet. And so I think I'll make that decision when I get there. But yeah, just continuing what I do because I love it so much, but then also going down different paths and continuing other things as well.
Amazing. And Sarah, I guess the last question I have for you is, like, I have a lot of parents that listen to the show, and a lot of people are always wondering, like, how can I, do a better job, like supporting my kids, or how can I do a better job, or how can I connect more with my kids? Like, my kids now, they're not opening up to me. They're not sharing as much. They're always just fine. And they don't have that deep connection that it seems that you and Ellie have. So if you had to leave somebody with a few like words of wisdom on how to do that as a parent, what would they be?
That's such a good question.
It is such a good question. I love this question. I think that there's a certain stage and a certain point in parenting your kids when your kids get to the right age, and it's different based on their maturity level, but so you have to kind of trust your gut and what they can handle. But I think that when the time is right, really sharing your own struggles and your own vulnerabilities with your kids, and talk about your failures and talk about the things you wish you would have done differently, and then turn them into something that is positive, which is like what you learned from a failure, or where you are now because of what you went through, or teaching them that just because something's hard or going through a hard time isn't a bad thing. Coming out of hard things makes us feel good, and that you're always changing, and that's okay. And basically that, like, that time when you can become, I don't want to say friends, but when you can start becoming, well, Ellie's nodding her head, when you become a real person, your kids understand that being a real person and a whole person comes with all kinds of flaws, mistakes, regrets, and resilience. And then they start to realize that they're real people too, and not just a kid who has to be perfect all the time. And then you can make that shift, and it gives them a huge sense of relief that they can bounce back from stuff, that they can change their mind and pivot in life and be okay.
From a kid's perspective, I think that in the past year, as I've seen my parents show more of themselves, and even just like little, all depends on the family and obviously the person and the parent, but it's even like they start swearing more, and then we all get to like have fun and like be friends again, and just things like that, where you start seeing your parents as real people instead of like your parents, which is very interesting. And I think that is definitely where the opening up happens a lot more, and the trust.
Yeah, I told a friend the other day, if you want your daughter to start opening up to you, her daughter's 13. And I was like, are you opening up to her? Or like, have you talked to her about your problem with your mom or something at work that's pissing you off? Because if you're not opening up, she's definitely not going to open up and share.
It's little things like I used to be so scared to talk to my parents or my mom about like boys at school. And then she started telling me stories about like boys at her school. And then like, it was just like a mutual thing that happened. I think that's really good advice.
That's some super solid advice. And I think it's also can be very challenging, right? Because like you said, Ellie, like you felt like you were all kind of friends again, and that you put your parents on this pedestal sometimes of like, that's them. And I just see them as my parents, not really as part of us. Right. But I think there's obviously a time, I guess, where they kind of have to be separate in a way. Otherwise, I think maybe the kids won't respect the parents as much. Like I know kids who are, they're considered best friends with their parents, and their parents have a hard time getting them to do anything or getting them to stop with certain bad behaviors, because the kid, I think, feels that they're not a parent anymore to the kid. They're like their best friends.
I think as a kid, it's definitely time and place where, in my opinion, it's not like my mom was telling me about all these things when I was 13 or super young. Like it's definitely a recent thing when I'm 17 and 18. And so I think I'm not a parent, obviously, but I'm sure all parents go through a stage where you feel disconnected from your kid, and likewise.
Yeah, and it's like, that doesn't mean there still aren't boundaries, right? There are still many times when, first of all, we don't tell our kids everything. We have privacy and those kinds of meaning, like we're not talking about every little thing and assuming, because I know that they're going to absorb the burden of a lot of that stuff. But I think that just knowing when the time is right to be open and honest, and other times, it's a one-way street. I always say, like, being a parent is primarily a one-way street, but if you don't make that shift at some point, you're not going to ever get to a two-way street. And my biggest thing with my boys and Ellie is when they got into their, teen years, I would say 14 or 15, I was like, we're in a relationship. This is a mutual thing here. Like, just because you don't want to do something, but it's important to me, part of being in a relationship with me is that you have to do it for me because it's simply important to me. Like, I do things for you all day long and I'm happy to, but this is like got to be a give and take. And you need to have some sensitivity and like literally develop your empathy skills to have a healthy relationship. It doesn't mean being best friends at all. I don't treat Ellie like I'm still Ellie's mom. And of course, we're good friends too, but I wouldn't say we're friends first. We're mother-daughter first. And at times we're really good friends. And at other times we're mother-daughter.
I love that. And I think this is a great way to end the conversation because that was just some really, really solid advice for parents and also for kids, right? Because I love, Ellie, how you chimed in from your perspective as well. So this has been an amazing conversation. I think probably, hopefully it took this conversation down a path that maybe you guys haven't talked as much about, which is like the mental health, the parenting, the like addiction, the boundaries, that side of thing. And I think people are going to want to definitely connect with you and follow along with you on social media and stuff. So where's the best place to do that?
Ellie Zeiler is my name on anything, everything.
Sarah Zeiler. Yep.
Amazing. So I will make sure to include the links to your social media channels in the show notes. And for those listening, I would encourage you to share a takeaway if this episode resonated with you. Maybe it was something that Sarah said with regards to parenting and how her and her husband have supported Ellie throughout her journey as a creator. Maybe it was something that Ellie said about what she does to manage her mental health or deal with bullying online or the haters, whatever it was. Make sure to tag Ellie, tag Sarah, and tag myself because we'd love to hear your feedback. And we once again thank you for listening to this episode of The Adversity Advantage. I'm your host, Doug Bopst, and we'll see you next time.